Have you ever wondered if it was all worth it? All the emails and phone calls, special projects, late meetings, early mornings, and out-of-town trips? Frantically shuttling bodies back and forth and cobbling together another meal just to check that off the list. Have you ever wondered if you have the balance right? Have we worked hard enough? Have we played enough? What will our children remember about us? Have you ever wondered if you've done it right? Is it possible to even really know that? Did we give our passions and energies to the right causes? Have we given ourselves to the things that matter the most? Or in the end, is it all just vapor?
First of all, how about our boy Brad Gwynn lending his voice to that video? He did a great job. If you see him, if he comes out of hiding and you can identify him, tell him that you were impressed. This is the first part in our new series called Vapor, and I'm going to tell you all about that in a minute. But I also want to acknowledge that, Lord willing, this is the last 100% virtual service that we have to do at Grace Raleigh, as the elders voted to begin or to resume in-person gatherings next week on February the 14th. So I'm looking forward to having people in this space. As the service was starting, Erin came up to me and she said, just think, this time next week, there will be people here. We will see smiles and we can talk to other folks because, listen, I'll be honest with you. I'm tired of making small talk with Emil, our keyboard player, every week. We're out of things to talk about. I need more of you to come here and create a buffer between me and the band. I'm sick of it. But we're looking forward to seeing you next week. Those of you who can join us. Those of you who can't, who don't feel comfortable coming back yet, we totally get it. Your experience is going to be the exact same, so don't worry about that. And finally, if this is news to you, if you didn't know that we were resuming in-person gatherings next week, then that just means that you're not on our email distribution list. And if you'd like to be, whether you're watching on YouTube or watching on our website, there's a link below that you can click, fill out some information, and you'll get all the latest news from Grace Raleigh if that's something that interests you. Now, like I said, this series is focused on Ecclesiastes. It's called Vapor, and you're going to find out why at the end of this sermon today. I love the book of Ecclesiastes. I think it might be my favorite book. It's definitely my favorite book in the Old Testament because Ecclesiastes just tells the truth, man. Ecclesiastes is stark. I relate to Ecclesiastes. I appreciate the courage of Ecclesiastes. But the way to think about it, I think, as we approach it together as a church, is to really think about the idea, what if Jeff Bezos or Warren Buffett or Bill Gates, some of these people who have climbed the mountains in their life, they are at the mountaintop. They have all the success that you could possibly want. They have all the things, all the toys, anything that we would look at to say, I'm going to pursue that, and that's going to make me happy. That's going to make me content. That's going to provide me joy and provide what feels like a fulfilled life. Certainly they've done. And so what if at the end of their lives, they wrote a memoir? And they said, after I've done everything, after I've accomplished everything that there was to accomplish, from my view on the mountaintop, let me tell you what I see. Let me tell you, as I look back over the years of my life, what was worth it. Let me tell you what really brought me true joy and true contentment. Let me tell you where I felt most fulfilled. And let me tell you what I regret doing. Wouldn't you want to read that? I would. I would love to know at the end of their lives when they did everything, the American dream, everything that any of us would ever want to do, they've done. I would love to know at the end of their life what was worth it. What made you happy and what was a waste of time. That's what Solomon does for us in the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, many of you know that Solomon was the son of David. He was the third king of Israel. We may know that he wrote Proverbs and Song of Solomon as well in the Bible. But what you may not know or remember, I think I've mentioned this in years past, but Solomon was really a very accomplished king. He was the wisest man to have ever lived. He strengthened the army. Really, Solomon's life was he drug a third world country into international prominence, into being a first world country. Economically, he raised the stakes. He built a port city to begin to receive tariffs from other nations. He built great monuments. It was a great time of peace. He built up an infrastructure within Israel and was the greatest king that they ever saw. He was a rich, wealthy man. He had everything that you could ever want. And he got to the end of his life, and he writes for us the book of Ecclesiastes, where he does exactly what I said would be great. What if somebody who had been to the mountaintop wrote a book and told us what they saw? That's what Solomon does. But what I love about this book is what I alluded to earlier. It's bleak, man. It's stark. We've been joking as a staff that we have saved the bleakest book of the Bible for the bleakest month of the year. Everybody hates February, man. February's tough. Ecclesiastes is tough. It is unflinchingly honest. Ecclesiastes really, parts of it, isn't trying to make us feel good. It's just trying to tell us the truth. Ecclesiastes puts in our faces some pretty difficult realities. And if you're really paying attention, if you really care about the message, it's tough. But it gets a bad rap, I think the book does, because it's not just bleak. As a matter of fact, the reason I love this book is not just because it's unflinchingly honest and just blunt and just tells you how it is without any cushion or anything like that. But I actually believe that if we will courageously confront the stark realities presented in Ecclesiastes, that on the other side of that confrontation awaits us true joy and true contentment. I actually think that if we'll confront the realities in Ecclesiastes, that we'll come out the other side with a greater capacity for joy, with greater contentment about the blessings that we have now, with a greater appreciation for God, and with a greater desire for Jesus. And so that's what we're going to do. We are going to confront what Ecclesiastes places in front of us. We're going to sit in some difficult realities. And so I'll tell you this. First of all, this series is just that. It's a series. It's designed in 4 separate parts with the intention that you would consume all 4 of those parts. So I usually don't say things like this, but I would encourage you that if you miss a week, try to catch up before you listen to the next week or watch the next week. The last series we did, Things You Should Know, those were kind of standalone sermons. You could drop in at any point in the series, listen to the sermon, it would make total sense, and that was fine. Some series are designed that way. This one is designed to build on one another. Because of that, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you on the front end, I'm going to bum you out today. All right? Today stinks. I'm not going to say happy things today. I don't have good news for you today. We're going to get to the end. I'm going to be building this tension to a place where it feels like now Nate's going to give us the good news, and then I'm not. I'm just going to pray, and we're going to go about our days, okay? So just know that up front. I'm telling you now. Because I feel like that's the ecclesiastical thing to do. That's what Ecclesiastes would want us to do. Sometimes we have to sit in the difficult parts of life. Sometimes we have to let things stew a little bit. And so that's what we're going to do this morning. This book starts out with it has to be the most depressing opening of any book of the Bible. It's 11 verses, it's this poem or stanza, and it's just, here you go. It's just, everything stinks is what Solomon does at the beginning. I'm not going to read you all 11 verses, but I did want to give you a sense of the sentiment of this passage. And so I'm going to read you verses 3 and 4 and 7 and 8 as kind of summary verses of how Solomon chooses to open up his memoir, telling us how he found, what he really believes leads to true contentment and true joy. This is what he writes in verse 3 and 4. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. And then down in 7 and 8, all streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the stream flows, there they flow again. And things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. That's rough, man. That's rough. He says he sees all the toil. A generation comes and they pour out and they build up and they build armies and they build buildings and they have careers and they build families, and then they go. And then the next generation does it. And then that generation fades away and the world remains the same. It doesn't matter. It's just an endless cycle. And then he has this line. I think it's such a great line. I love this picture. All the streams flow to the ocean, yet the sea is never filled. All the water on all the continents, all the little brooks and streams flow to rivers, and all of those rivers empty themselves out into the sea. All the water from the world is emptied out into the sea, and yet the sea is never filled. The eye can never see enough. The ear can never hear enough. That's bleak. But it's true, isn't it? You feel that it's true. You know that it's true. It feels appropriate on Super Bowl Sunday to bring up a quote from the undisputed king of Super Bowls, Tom Brady. It's hard for me to say this. For those of you who don't know, if you haven't heard of Tom Brady, God bless you. You are a fortunate person. But I'm going to fill you in, okay? He is quite simply, and this is hard for me to say, the greatest football player who's ever lived. He just is. I'm a Peyton Manning guy. I like Peyton Manning. I don't like Tom Brady. But darn it, he's good at football. Every other sport has these conversations about who's the greatest of all time, and I pick this guy, and I pick this guy, and we kind of debate back and forth. Football, that's done. There's no debate. He's the best ever. Today, he plays in the Super Bowl. He already has 6 championship rings. He's won 6 times. Do you understand that if he wins today, that he will have more Super Bowl championships as an individual than any single franchise in the NFL? That's absurd. The dude's ridiculous. And he was asked recently, Tom, which one of your championships is your favorite? Which one of your Super Bowl wins is your favorite one? And when that question was posed, I immediately thought, well, it's the first one, right? It's got to be the first one, because that's kind of, he cracked the egg there, and that was the sweetest, and then after that, whatever. Or maybe there was one where there was some life circumstances going on, and it made that one particularly sweet. So I was interested in the answer. And without missing a beat, he just kind of smirked, and he said, the next one. The next one's my favorite one. The next one means the most. The eyes never tire of seeing. The ears are never done hearing. All the streams flow to the ocean, and yet it's never full. It's just a fact of life, isn't it? It's never enough. Dude's won 6 Super Bowls. Couldn't Atlanta just have one of those? The most important thing to him is the next one. And that's how we are too, isn't it? Every time we buy a house, what do? We know what our budget is. We know what's smart to spend. But then this house at this level has these features that I really, really need. I didn't need them before, but now I need them or I will not be happy. We buy at the apex level, right? We always want the next promotion. We always want the next thing. We always want the next vacation. We can never have enough good meals. Look at me. I can never have enough good steak. I always want the next one. How am I going to cook that one? Who's going to come over then? We're always thinking about the next thing. We always want more for ourselves and more for our kids and more for our families and more for our friends. We always want more. We never tire of seeing or hearing. Solomon's right. He's right when he opens up that way. And we in our guts know it. But he doesn't just do these blanket statements where he says, guys, listen, it doesn't matter. Nothing matters. He actually gets into specifics. He gives us his different pursuits. And he starts off the next chapter and a half, the second half of chapter 1 and all of chapter 2, he details these pursuits. The first one he says is that he pursued wisdom. He pursued wisdom. And this doesn't mean just biblical wisdom. This is like academia. This is knowing a lot of things. He was a very learned man. He says this. He says, I applied my heart to seek and to search out wisdom by all that is done under the sun. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. So he decided, I'm going to make my life about being smart. I'm going to make my life about pursuing wisdom. I'm going to be the smartest person in the room, in every room that I go into. And by all accounts, he did it. He says here, I knew more than any of the kings that preceded me. I am the smartest person in the room. And then we also know, and I mentioned this already, that he was the wisest man to ever live. Solomon knew all the stuff, man. He had the doctorates. He probably had some honorary doctorates. He knew who the minority whip was in 1976. Like, he knew the things. He was up to date on current events. He understood photosynthesis. Like, he got all the stuff. He could answer the questions. He was the one you wanted on your trivia team. Like I said, he was the smartest person in the room in every room that he went into. He was the best. He had accomplished that. He climbed that mountain. He was the obnoxious guy that has an office lined with bookshelves that just kind of say to you with a smug smirk, yes, I've read all these and I know everything they say. That was Solomon. But at the top of that mountain, he says this. In Ecclesiastes 1:17, I perceive that this also is but a striving after the wind. It was a waste. I banked my contentment and my joy and my happiness. I made my life about pursuing wisdom, about being the smartest person in the room, about reading all the books and knowing all the things, and I did. And from that mountaintop, it was a vanity of vanities. It was a chasing after the wind. I wasted my time. So, he pursued pleasure. He decided that he was going to pursue pleasure and deny himself nothing. Look at how he describes it. I said in my heart, Ecclesiastes 2:1, I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. Isn't that the American dream? Come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. He denied himself nothing. He had all the funds he needed to buy all the toys, and that's exactly what he did. He had the best parties. He drank the best drink. He had the best food. I bet he committed a big portion of his life to throwing these big royal parties that were just the absolute best. They were super fun. He had all the biggest people come in. He brought in international celebrities, and they went after it. He was a member of the best country club. He sat on the porch, and he had drinks with his buddies every afternoon. He went on the shopping trips, and he did the vacations, and he had all the fun. I don't know what an ancient yacht looked like, but his was trending on Twitter when he got it. I guarantee it. He had all the stuff. He had all the fun. And then when all that fun, when all that partying wasn't enough, he built monuments. He built things for himself. Like I said, he built a whole city with a port in it. He built a temple. He built a wall around Jerusalem. He did public works projects. He had the lake house, right? He went ahead and sprung for the beach house. He got the top floor where the elevator is the front door. He went ahead and got the fun car. He went ahead and he bought the boat. He did all of that. He had been there. And then he pursued carnal pleasure. We find out other places in Scripture that the man had 300 wives and 700 concubines. He literally denied himself nothing. If his eye saw it and he wanted it, he had it. And I think that's important to understand because I think often that's what we think would make us happiest. If I could just have the thing, then my life would be better. If I could just move into that neighborhood, if I could just have a relationship with that person, if I could just be done with this relationship and start a new relationship with somebody that is X, Y, or Z, if my kids can just accomplish this thing, if I just didn't have this problem in my life, if I could just have that job. We often set our eyes on things and think if we could just have that thing, I would be more joyful and content. If I could just have that thing, I wouldn't be so stressed. And what Solomon is saying is, he had the thing. He had all the things. He had 300 wives and 700 concubines. He had vacation homes. He did all the fun things. If his eye saw anything, he had it. He denied himself nothing. And from that mountaintop, Solomon says this, "And whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure. For my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity and a striving after the wind." His eyes never tired of seeing. His ears never tired of hearing. All the possible streams of pleasure were flowing into his life, and it was never full. All he wanted was the next one. Maybe if he just had a few more wives. Maybe if he built another city. Maybe if he had another boat or did another deal. Then he could rest. He says, nope, I had it all. And it was a vanity too. It was a chasing after the wind. And then he turns his eyes to one more thing, and he pursues ambition, career. He pursues accomplishment. He built up the kingdom. He drug it out of the third world into the first. He was successful at this. He was the CEO that first takes a company into being a Fortune 500 company and then a Fortune 50 company. He nailed the GameStop stock several times in his life. He knew what he was doing. He accomplished great things. He chased career. He chased power. He got all the promotions you could possibly want. He did way better with the company than anyone ever thought he could. He was the one that you went to say, what should I do with this deal? He accomplished everything that there was to accomplish in career. And at the end of that pursuit, he again said, this is a vanity of vanities. It is a chasing after the wind. In Solomon's conclusions to his different pursuits, I'm reminded of another football story. Maybe this is appropriate for Super Bowl Sunday, or maybe I just need to expand my experiences. But if you like football, then you will also like Brett Favre. He's a great quarterback for the Green Bay Packers in the 90s. And Brett Favre is one of these good old country boys. He played at Southern Miss. He coaches high school football now. He still does interviews with a sleeveless shirt on because he can. And he's just that kind of guy. And I heard a story from one of his wide receivers one time that he would the coach would call in a play and we're not going to do that, and he would literally draw a play on the dirt in the NFL field and tell everybody what they're going to do. That's just the kind of guy he was. So everybody liked him. And there's a famous story that after his first Super Bowl in 1997, They won. And the media is looking for Brett to ask him some questions about winning. And nobody can find him anywhere. So somebody, one of the staffers or trainers, goes to find Brett, and they actually find him in a bathroom stall, hunched over crying. And I don't know exactly how the conversation went. I read this years ago, but the thrust of it is they found Brett crying, and they said, what are you doing? And he goes, I just thought that there would be more. What do you mean? He said, I thought it would feel different than this. I thought it would feel better than this to finally win one. Can you believe that? He gave his whole life, dedicated his whole life to the craft of football, Little League, and high school. It consumed his college years. Then he devoted himself, and he had a rocky beginning as a quarterback. It took him a while to get his feet underneath him and to prove himself. And now here he is. He's the best player on the best team, and he just won the biggest game, and he was the MVP of it. And his conclusion is, I just thought it would feel better than this. I thought I would finally have something. But it's the same conclusion that Solomon draws. Vanity of vanities, chasing after the wind. And I think that is such a perfect conclusion for Solomon to have drawn, for Brett Favre to have stumbled into. Because that phrase, vanity, or chasing after the wind, really, if you read this in the original language, comes from the Hebrew word havel, H-E-V-E-L, havel. And havel is really best translated as vapor or smoke. It really means vapor or smoke. It has kind of this enigmatic quality. It's this picture of, if you think of smoke is there, you can see it, and it looks like, if it's solid enough, if it's coming off of a big fire, that you could reach out and grab it. But if you reach out to wrap your hand around it, it just slips through your fingers. It's there 1 second, you see it, it's very real, but as soon as the flame goes out, you kind of just watch it dissipate. It's there 1 minute, it's gone the next, right? And that's what Solomon says all of those things are. You think that pleasure is going to make you happy. You think that if you just get the next thing, if you just get the next house, if you just have that next relationship, that when you get there, that's what's going to make you happy. That's what's going to do it. Then your soul can rest. And he tells you that when you get to it, you're going to reach out to grab it. And it's going to disappear. You're going to look at it, you're going to see it, you're going to turn your head, and then when you look back, it's going to be gone. And you're going to start chasing the next thing. That's why this series is called Vapor. Because that's what Solomon says it is. As a matter of fact, I believe, based on Ecclesiastes, that Solomon would look at a vast majority of Americans and say to them, you're wasting your life. You're chasing vapor. It's going to disappear on you. I think he would look at the vast majority of people in our culture and remind them, all the rivers flow to the sea. It's never going to be full. You aren't either. You're wasting your life. The good news is, God gives us something that's not vapor. That's not a waste. But we're going to talk about that next week. Let's pray. Father, would you let the weight of Ecclesiastes rest on us? Would you let us sit in this? Would we honestly consider what in our lives is vapor? Will we consider, God, what are we chasing that we can never catch? What is it that we want that will never satisfy? Father, I ask specifically for those listening, for those people who call Grace home. Would you give us the courage that Ecclesiastes requires? To admit to ourselves and to you where we're chasing things that we can't catch? Would you create in us an earnest desire to reach for the things that we can have, that will satisfy us, that will ultimately draw us near to you, that will help us desire Jesus even more? Would you be with us throughout our weeks, Lord? Help us to be people who pursue you, who want to know you, God, who lean into you. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.